know recently because of the extraordinary work he's done in his portfolio as Economic Development Minister. Of course, the brochure is absolutely obsolete, right? Because now he's the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, and I know he's going to do an absolutely extraordinary job in that portfolio like he did in the last one. But what I love about him so much is that we're ideologically congruent. You see, I called him up and I said, Minister Todd Smith, Minister Todd, do you believe in free speech, sir? And he said, yes, of course I do. I said, great! How about you give a free one? Please welcome Mr. Todd Smith.
It did cost you a couple of samosas, actually. And I gotta try some of that whiskey on the table before I leave. I've got my driver here, so we're all good. Anyway, it is.
He drank already.
Great to be here. Yeah, he has strict rules. Anyway, Dean, it's great to see you here from Ottawa, and Dan, it's great to see you as well. Great to see such a friendly group of people, honestly, with the Concerned Coalition. Jocelyn probably called me, I don't know what, 3 years ago, Jocelyn? Jocelyn, where is Jocelyn? Over there. Jocelyn's a part-time constituent of mine. She has many properties in Prince Edward County, and I represent Bay of Quinte. So it's about 2 hours east of here on Lake Ontario on the Bay of Quinte. So Belleville, Trenton, Prince Edward County, and Jocelyn wasn't calling me because I was a part-time constituent of hers. She was calling me on behalf of some of her employees and some of her friends who had employees who were close to losing their employees to states south of the border. And at that time, I was the critic for energy in the opposition. And one of the people that she was calling on behalf of was Shalini as well, and her great samosa making facility that she has in Scarborough. And you know, one of the things that we wanted to do back then, and certainly what I wanted to do back then as the critic for energy, was really understand what was happening to small and medium-sized businesses when it came to electricity bills in the province. Because as Peter alluded to earlier, there were programs that were available for large users, but and then the threshold kept changing all the time. But for a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses, they weren't qualifying for the ICI. By the way, Peter, I don't know if Dean recorded your speech or not, but Dean probably should have been videotaping that, and that would be perfect to put on the web, because I think it could be a very appropriate speech to have those in Canada to see, really, because what's happening, thanks to the Liberal governments, to businesses, is just a travesty. And so fortunately, because of my relationship with Jocelyn and the relationship that I was able to make with other members of the Concerned Coalition of Manufacturers over the last couple of years, we started to chip away in opposition and really had an impact on what the Liberal government was doing in Ontario that was sending manufacturing jobs to other jurisdictions. As you probably know, you've probably heard me say this or other members of my government, 320,000 manufacturing jobs left Ontario under the Liberal government. And there were a lot of reasons for that, but one of them was the energy policy. So we spent a lot of time, and I really want to thank the Coalition for the work that they've done in providing important information to us as we developed our policy on not just the electricity file, but on small business and red tape as well. So it's been fundamental, actually, in us putting together not just an election platform leading into our victory in 2018, but in what we're doing now in the Government of Ontario, and making sure that we're working alongside of businesses to make sure that we will have businesses here in Ontario, so families like Adriana's can come to Ontario and have kids that go to Queen's University and become chemical engineers and continue to create wealth in Ontario. You know, I'll tell you, it's been a hell of a 24 hours for me. I mean, like, yesterday morning I woke up and the sun was shining and everything was great, and we'd seen 191,000 jobs created in Ontario under my watch, and you know, businesses were super excited about what we were doing. And then I had a meeting and I found out I was going to Children and Community Services. I still don't even know the actual name of my new portfolio, but anyway, the picture looks good. So, I won't look like that 2 years from now. I guarantee I will have aged significantly. Anyway, it has been an absolute pleasure in the role that I have been in at economic development, job creation, and trade, in working with businesses and then actually being able to measure the impact that we have been able to make in our ministry, that you have been able to make to our ministry. I think that's the important thing, right? Because we don't create the jobs, you create the jobs, and we can certainly create the environment for you to create jobs. And you know, I think about Shalini and that call that I had 2 or 3 years ago, and she was being run out of town by 5 neighbors because of the beautiful smell that was emanating from her manufacturing facility. And you know, because of the conversation that we had, we were able to bring in some changes to protect employment lands, and so that businesses like Shalini's can continue to employ lots of great people and expand, and we're doing that right across the province. Change some of the environmental standards as well to make sure that we're protecting businesses, because if we don't have businesses that are creating wealth in Ontario, then we're not going to have the social programs that I'm now responsible for delivering in Ontario, right? So, well, I guess there is a silver lining in me heading there after all. So, but anyway, it has been a real honor and a pleasure to work with this group, and I commend you on your first couple of years that you've been a thing in Ontario, and you really have made an impact. And you know, it's those small things that you might not think are making a big impact, but I can tell you, when Jocelyn goes on AM 640 and just reels and reels and reels on the damaging policies of the previous Liberal government and what it means to her business and what it means to other manufacturers in Ontario, that goes a long way. It's one thing, yeah, you should give her a hand. And it's not just Jocelyn, it's other members as well. I think here's a really important distinction, because you know, it's one thing for Dean to stand up in Parliament, and it's one thing for me to stand up at Queen's Park in front of the media gallery and you know, defend our job creators in Ontario, but we're politicians. But when it comes from the manufacturers themselves telling their stories about the impact that Liberal policies are having on their businesses, that means 100 times more, and I think Dean would agree with me. It really does mean a heck of a lot more when it comes from those who are actually employing people in Ontario and running businesses. So really keep up what you're doing. It's so important. It really is so important. We're going to continue to work with you, obviously, reducing red tape. I've got a whole speech there that Michael has in his hands, and give me the last page, Mike. I just figured I'm just sick of reading speeches. But you know, we've set some targets on reducing red tape, as you probably know, 25% by 2020, which is next year. Saving businesses $400 million in dealing with the regulatory burden that they would have otherwise had to deal with. And I talked about the 320,000 manufacturing jobs that we've lost. And certainly, you know, one of the areas that we've already started acting on is reducing the red tape. So Bill 47, Making Ontario Open for Business Act, unwinding the Liberals' Bill 148, and all of the damage that did in our economy and in our employment sector. And then Bill 66, which was the Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act, another big piece. Last week I announced a regulatory package that we were removing as well, and reduced a lot of red tape there. We brought in the housing bill, Bill 108, which was reducing red tape. It's not a red tape bill per se, but it's all about building homes and allowing industry to build quicker. It's reducing red tape across a number of sectors there. I was supposed to be presenting a red tape package this fall, but Vic Fideli will be presenting a red tape package this fall, and it is going to be massive. It's an omnibus style piece of legislation that's going to get us towards that target of 25% and reducing the cost of compliance by over $400 million. It's really going to happen. And since we've started to pick away at some of this stuff, we have actually seen, and this is quite startling, our manufacturing sector employment has increased by 9,000 people between May 2018 and May 2019. So, you know, that's great. got a long way to go to make up for the 320,000 we lost, but we have seen growth in the manufacturing sector for the first time in a long time. And that's because I think you folks have confidence in what's happening at the provincial level, because you know you've got a government there that's going to work with you. Now, you can't say the same thing about the government that Dean gets to look at every day up in Ottawa, but we're going to change that this fall. And Peter's going to write one heck of a speech to get us there. I just want to say, too, that, I mentioned that overall employment in the last calendar year has reached almost 200,000 in Ontario, and thank you for everything you're doing there. But I also just want to wrap up by saying that, our Premier Ford, he takes a lot of shots, but he really is in your corner, and our government is in your corner. And when we sit at the cabinet table and we talk about our small and medium-sized manufacturers, when we talk about our large manufacturers, we like them too, but because they're creating jobs as well. But there's a tremendous pride in the work that you're doing and employing people in Ontario, because if we don't have you, then we can't have a public education system. We can't have a public health care system. We can't have the social programs that I'm now responsible for delivering. And I think together, working with you, we can make sure that Ontario is the best place to invest. So thanks for having me here, and congratulations on the meeting.
Well, thank you, Minister, and regardless of who's delivering it in the fall, a very appreciative audience for what you do on the red tape issue on that front as well. So, thank you. My name is David Sword, and I work for this organization, the Petroleum Producers of Natural Gas. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to all of you for what you do. You support our sector with all of the manufactured good that goes into it. There's been studies on pipelines that have come across. I worked on the Energy East pipeline. Outside of Alberta, the province that would have benefited the most was Ontario, actually. And it was the manufacturing and the goods and services that supported it. And the Canadian manufacturers and exporters are still doing a lot of work on that. And that's manufacturing groups like yourselves that are the backbone of it. So thank you. When you need something, if they don't make it, or in Ontario, they know how to make it. On it, a really rich supply chain, and it's you folks that are doing it. So thank you for being the backbone of our sector and industry, and being so supportive of what we need to do to help get our product to market as well. Unwavering in your support, so a deep thank you. I get to introduce our next speaker, but sometimes a speaker doesn't need any introduction. What do you do? Well, you still introduce them anyway. He has a life that is a very public life. He had that in terms of holding public office at the highest levels in our country as a federal cabinet minister. And yet he still continues to have a very high-profile life, giving us insight into what's happening on the gasoline markets, and not just what's happening, but why it's happening, and what's happening upstream to cause those kinds of things as well. So a very, very busy person, but when he's not doing all that kind of stuff, he's a dad to 5 children, including twin 13-year-olds, and spends a great deal of time in charitable events with the Big Brothers and Sisters organization in his area. And when he's not doing all that, he tries to get to the cottage and listen to the Blue Jays on the dock with a can of beer. So please, a warm welcome for Dan McTeague.